And just consider for a minute if we heard about something 40 years after the fact in another language, it doesn't lend itself to credibility. I also want to say Copernicus and Galileo were not punished by scientists for going against the grain of what science was saying at the time. They were punished for going against the church about what the church was saying at the time, which disagreed with what science was saying at the time. In 1992, the Catholic Church apologized for how they treated Galileo and said pretty much he was right, we were wrong. It was very definitely the Catholic Church who did this. As far as saying God is metaphysical, God exists beyond the physical, that's a statement of fact, a positive claim that you are making. I don't feel like you backed that up. If you're going to say that something exists, the onus is on you. You have the burden of proof to show that it does, or at least make a very strong case that it does, and I don't feel that you've done that except for the circular argument of saying that the Bible says so. And using a special revelation, as you mentioned, is not considered a valid way of knowing whether something is true or not, as I mentioned before. As far as quoting the beginning of John 1:1, in the beginning there was the Word. John, first of all, is the only of the New Testament scholars to mention that part of it. Everybody else seems to think that Jesus was either they don't mention his birth, or they just say that he became supernatural at a later point during his baptism or at another time. The rules of logic do exist. They are means. I can explain more about what that means later if you'd like. But my main point is that I don't feel that Jed has fulfilled the case that I put out or refuted it as far as saying that belief in gods are justified. He touched on that. Saying that Yahweh is the one true God, I don't feel like we fulfilled that special revelation of saying God is, Yahweh is the one true God. I mean, you could say that about any religion. There are plenty of people who follow Islam who say the same thing about, Muhammad being a prophet, which he doesn't believe, and so on, or that Jesus is the Christ. I don't feel like he made a case that showed that beyond a reasonable doubt either. That's all I have time for, and I think we are on to the question and answer now, if I'm correct. Thanks very much.
You can all clap now. And Jason, if you'll come up and moderate their questions and answers, please. Mike.
Okay. All right. Question and answer. You got any questions? Anybody, please go ahead and raise your hand. I see that when you're first. Just a second. Try to keep the questions down to 1 minute. Remember, they're questions, not really your time to speak.
Yes. Ask Dave. Would like to ask Dave, since he is questioning the contradictions in the Bible. I studied his track in the last couple days. It's okay to be an atheist, and I found numerous contradictions, which I copied off on hard copy. Obviously, I don't have time, but one of them is that you want to reduce the spread of AIDS, as I do, as an activist, but yet you're against circumcision. Am I correct? That's what it says in the track.
Is that the end of your question?
Well, maybe I should just say that the New York Times article says that the World Health Organization urges circumcision itself to reduce the spread of AIDS. It's right here in the New York Times. And so if there's a contradiction here. If you want to stop AIDS and yet you're against circumcision, how does that jive with the World Health Organization and what they're trying to do?
Okay. Thanks for your question.
Sure.
Just to make sure I understood you here, you're saying in my tract I wrote, I said I'm against the spread of AIDS, and I put in there that the reason I'm against it, well, I think it's obvious why I'm against it, but
sure.
What bothers me about the way religious people go about this is the Catholic Church, most prominently, has said condom use is a bad thing, and that helps to spread AIDS if people are having sex in AIDS-ridden regions. And then you also said the World Health Organization says that circumcision can help stop the spread of AIDS, and you're asking why I put that in there.
No, you put in your track that you thought that circumcision was barbaric, but
Okay.
what I'm trying to understand is how, I see a contradiction if you're wanting to stop, the spread of AIDS and circumcision, you see circumcision as barbaric, and yet the World Health Organization, what would you answer to them when they're trying to urge people that circumcision helps to stop the spread of AIDS?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your question. I want to point out it's not really relevant to whether God exists or not, but and I'll answer it if you'd like me to.
Well, what I'm saying is it's relevant to, if you're the one who's questioning contradictions in the Bible, then, and you say it's okay to be an atheist, then it's okay for us to question your contradictions.
It is absolutely appropriate for you to question what I say. I'm not claiming to have the universal truth of the God, as the Bible does. I'm very glad you told me that. I've heard some studies about that. I didn't know that the New York Times had reported on it recently, and I'd like to see that when you
Sure.
The reason I think it's barbaric, in the sense that it's prescribed for religious reasons, it's obviously painful. If the pain and suffering it causes a child of 8 days outweighs, the risk that he would get AIDS, I think if you live in an AIDS-ridden region, then it can make sense. If you don't, it's basically a matter of convenience for the parents, as far as it's easier to keep your child infection-free and clean and things like that if he's circumcised. But if you're doing it for religious reasons and not for health reasons, then I think that is barbaric. And have I answered your question?
Kind of, but whatever the reasons are, if it does prevent, if it has a cash nexus, as William James says, a pragmatic reason, who cares about what the reason is, as long as it does that? And what I've found in your track is there's contradiction after contradiction after contradiction, and this is just one of them. And so how can I trust somebody who is questioning the contradictions of the Bible when they're contradicting themselves and defending their own atheism? This is where I'm coming from.
Okay.
And this is not personal.
I understand. I was just going to say, it sounds like an ad hominem argument. Just because I might be wrong about something means that everything else that I say is also wrong, which is a fallacy. As far as points that the Bible makes, it doesn't matter if I'm saying them and I wrote something else that's incorrect, or someone else says them. It doesn't matter who said it. If the Bible is incorrect or has contradictions, that's what we should be focusing on. And I think that's the important part.
Okay, so you said if you're, I'm sorry.
All right, that was actually a pretty good example. Try not to interrupt when you go through that.
Yeah.
We'll have time to go back to the questions after some people have a chance.
I might just respond to that too briefly. I think sort of in Dave's defense, you get the spirit of what Dave is saying by reading the track. Why, in his point of view, it's okay to be an atheist. I'm not saying there are absolutely no contradictions in the Bible about little details and so on. This can be due to scribal errors, errors in translations. Some things are idiomatic in the Bible. Expressions unique to a particular time and culture. But as to the basic teachings of the Bible, dealing with justification, salvation, what constitutes mercy, justice, and love, the Bible is consistent. If you'll get the spirit of it, and so you can strain at a gnat when reading the Bible, and I think a lot of people do. And I find the vast majority of these alleged contradictions, and some of them, a few things in the Bible, I have to admit, don't kind of add up a little bit to me, minor little details. But when I started reading the Bible, I found usually the alleged contradiction is taking something literally that should be figurative, or vice versa, or else taking something out of context. And we have to interpret the Bible in its historical context as well. Circumcision was a sign given to the Jews that God was in covenant with them. He didn't want everyone to be circumcised. And it's not something carried over, of course, into the new covenant. It would not be, it's just a matter of personal preference.